All right, everybody. It's a beautiful day in Midwood, Brooklyn, New York City. Midwood, Brooklyn. Beautiful area right here. And we're heading to 2232 Nostrand Avenue. The Mafia cops, Louis Ippolito and Stephen Caracapa's garage of death. At least it's what I'm calling it. Now we're going to get there, and I'm going to run down the property because unfortunately within the past 6 months to a year, some of it has been refaced. So the Google image that I thought I was coming to find has been changed. But nonetheless, we're going to the spot, the location of what I call the Mafia cop's garage of death. So let's talk about it. On February 10th of 1986, Stephen Caracappa and Louis Ippolito would pull over a man by the name of Israel Greenwald. Now, who is Israel Greenwald? This is a murder they committed, which, in my opinion, doesn't get spoken about enough. But we're going to talk about it. Israel Greenwald was born in Israel in 1951. And he was born to parents who were Holocaust survivors. And by the time he was in his 20s, he was becoming a bit of an entrepreneur. He had opened up his own pizzeria in Israel in a pretty much ultra-Orthodox area. And it was kind of uncommon for him to do such a thing, but in time he became very successful with his pizzeria. Ultimately, he starts getting into the jewel business with his father-in-law. He travels to South Africa, he learns a little bit about jewels, and then he ends up coming to the United States around 1977. And by the time he gets here in 77, he has 2 children. And he's opening up his own jewelry business called Blue River Enterprises. And he buys his first home in Far Rockaway, Queens. According to what his family says, he's a very liked individual. And he's a well-known guy in his area. Let's just get a look of the neighborhood so you guys can see. I know people outside this area like to see the neighborhoods. So he's a very well-liked individual, and according to what his family says, he would also help a lot of families that were, underprivileged, not doing well. He was known to help out a lot of people in the community. So around 86, what is going to happen is Israel Greenwald, he's going to travel to Europe to do some business. And before he goes, his friend, who till today is unnamed, this man's identity is still protected till today, even by the family. But let's get into that. His friend is going to give him a bond to cash for him in Europe as a favor. And he's going to say, yeah, sure, I'll do you the favor, I'll cash it for you. But when Israel Greenwald returns to the United States, he gets stopped by the FBI. And they say, Mr. Greenwald, what are you doing with this bond that you cashed? Where did you get that from? Because in case you didn't know, that's a stolen bond. Israel Greenwald says, I know nothing about it. I was cashing the bond for a friend of mine. Ultimately, the FBI says, listen, you need to get this friend. And at some point, Greenwald even wears a wire to try to set up this friend, because he goes to his friend and says, listen, you told me to cash a stolen bond. The FBI is on my ass now. Why did you do this to me? What's going on? So this friend that gave him the bond was working for another jeweler by the name of Banda. And Banda is involved in the scheme also. So, as I was saying, Greenwald eventually wears a wire, but that doesn't go too well because his friend notices he's wearing a wire, so that falls apart. So Greenwald's friend who gave him the bond goes to this gentleman, another jeweler by the name of Banda, and tells him, listen, this guy's really mad. I think he's talking to the feds. Now, Banda's boss in this scheme is one Burton Kaplan. You guys might know who he is, of course. The guy who helps set up this whole history with the Mafia cops. when he meets Louis Ippolito's cousin, Frank Santoro Jr. in prison. And Frank Santoro Jr. tells him, hey, when you get out of prison, I got a cousin who's crooked, and he'll be willing to do some work. So, let's stay in touch in case you ever need a little help on the street with some work. I can get my cousin who's a detective who's willing to do a little side work. And that's kind of the history for those of you who don't know about that. Now, Burton Kaplan has a criminal career that went back to the 1960s. He was involved in everything from the fencing of stolen goods to drug trafficking to all types of stuff. And interestingly enough, guys, he has an FBI file dating back to the early 70s. Now, I spoke in my upload, Goodfellas and Canarsie, about, and many of you know it's a famous story, in the early 1970s, Eugene Gold, the prosecutor, he puts the gold bug in Paul Vario's bargain auto, and it becomes known as the gold bug because Eugene Gold does it. And they tap Paul Vario's junkyard and his trailer. Well, oddly enough, Burton Kaplan ends up being one of the over 100 guys indicted who was caught on the tap doing business at Paul Vario's junkyard, fencing of stolen goods from hijacking and all types of stuff. So Burton Kaplan's ties to the Mafia goes back way before anything to do with Casso or anything. He goes back to Paul Vario, hanging out with him at the junkyard, and when Tremonti was running shit and all this other stuff. So his career in organized crime goes way back, and I was really surprised to find all this out when I was looking at Burton Kaplan's FBI files. So, maybe that was a little long-winded, but I hope you kind of see what I'm trying to say here. So what happens ultimately is the guy Banda goes to Burton Kaplan and says, hey, you know that guy that I got over there to cash that bond that got busted? Yeah, well, he's going to cooperate with the feds. Oh, yeah? Okay. Burton Kaplan reaches out to Frank Santoro Jr. We're on Nostrand Avenue right now. Alright guys, so he reaches out to Frank Santoro Jr. and he says, listen, I got a problem. I'm going to need that cousin that you always told me about that can do some work. So what's going to happen is Ippolito and Caracappa are going to pull over Israel Greenwald on February 10th of 1986. They're going to pull him over on the highway. And they're going to say, hey, your car came up as in a description of a hit and run. You need to come down and talk to us because we think that you're involved in this hit and run. So Israel Greenwald unwittingly goes with them, just to clear it up. Not knowing that he just fell into the hands of probably two of the worst police officers to ever wear the badge. Two of the most despicable criminals in American criminal history, Stephen Caracappa and Louis Ippolito. And they don't bring him down to the station. They don't bring down Mr. Israel Greenwald, family man, father, to the station. They bring him to a garage at 2232 Nostrand Avenue. And by that garage, waiting, is Frank Santoro Jr., cousin of Louis Ippolito, and a man by the name of Peter Franzone, who owns the garage. Now what's going to happen is they're going to pull into that garage. Frank Santoro is going to go in there with Stephen Caracappa, and Louis Ippolito and Peter Franzone are going to wait outside that garage. And within minutes, they're going to come out, and Frank Santoro Jr. is going to tell his friend Peter Franzone, hey, come inside, come in here for a second. He's going to come in there and he's going to see the dead body of one Israel Greenwald, shot multiple times, laying on the floor. And Frank Santoro is going to tell him, listen, you need to help me bury this body in this garage right now, and you're going to do it, or else you're going to end up fucking dead. In no uncertain terms, that's what he told him. And that's what they do. They bury him in the garage, and they put concrete over him, and that's where he's going to stay. And that garage was right here. Now I'm going to put an image of what this place looked like just a few months ago. And I'm going to also put an image of what the garage used to look like, so you can see. And the address of 2232 is back there where that white car is. That's technically where the building is, and I'm going to put it up. That's where the garages were, right back there. And we're going to walk around the block and get another view as well. This is the location of the Mafia cops' garage of death. Now, in April of 2005, they would finally discover Israel Greenwald's body under the cement in this garage that used to be right here. The building structure is still here. They have just refaced it. After the Mafia cops get arrested in early 2005, and the case starts unraveling, and Burton Kaplan becomes a witness, the man who set up this whole scheme, the man who connected them with Casso, the man who was getting all the information, the man who enabled the Mafia cops to become Anthony Gaspipe Casso's crystal ball, as he called it. When he starts cooperating after he's already serving a 20-plus year sentence for drug trafficking. When he starts cooperating to save his ass, he tells him, I don't know where this body was buried. All I remember was that it was on a garage on Nostrand Avenue. And Nostrand Avenue is very big, of course. They don't know exactly where that might be. But we're going to go back around, and we're going to see the other side of this building, and we're going to talk more about this case. I think we got some company. So they're talking, and you know, guys, I'm kind of glossing over the whole story of the Mafia cops, because if you're watching this video, there's a good chance that you do know a lot about it. You know about Burton Kaplan. And you know about Burton Kaplan, and you know a lot of this stuff. But I want to just bring you to one of the locations that these guys were using to commit their crimes. So the issue is, when Burton Kaplan becomes a witness for the government, he says, listen, I know about this Israel Greenwald murder. I helped set it up. He was buried in a garage on Nostrand Avenue, but unfortunately, I don't know where that garage is. And Nostrand Avenue is very big, so there's no way, like the cops, it's like a needle in a haystack. It's like the tiniest needle in the biggest haystack. But, as I mentioned, Frank Santora Jr. Now, unfortunately for Mr. Santora Jr., he would be killed in 1987.
Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Organized crime figures being gunned down in the streets. That's what happened to Carmine Variali and Frank Santora last Thursday on Bath Avenue in Bensonhurst.
Now, he wasn't the target, but he ended up walking with Variali, and he gets shot and killed by Frank Smith Jr. So what the cops are going to do is they're going to say, all right, well, let's dig back into Frank Santora Jr.'s homicide file. Let's look into what exactly, any information we can get in there. And in there, they find an address book. They find an address book, and in there there's a name by a man by the name of Peter Franzone, who owns a garage on Nostrand Avenue. And they say, this is interesting. Let's look into this. They contact Peter Franzone, and what happens? Peter Franzone spills the beans. He says, yes, this is my garage. And this is what happened on that night. This is what happened on the night of February 10th, 1986, when they killed Israel Greenwald, and they made me bury his body and cover it under a slab of concrete. And as I mentioned, it wouldn't be till 2005 that this body would be discovered and the family would get closure. Ultimately, they would sue New York City for millions of dollars and win, due to the antics of the Mafia cops. And we're going to go around the block here to get another look at the other side of this building where this garage was. And we're going to put some aerial photos up, and we're going to do a lot of cool stuff so you guys can get a real idea of what's going on here. Now, another thing happened in this garage as well. Let's cross over. Of course, you guys know the story of one Jimmy Heidel, right?
I shot him a couple of times. I didn't torture the kid. I didn't do anything like that. I shot him a couple of times. The kid died.
Well, what's a couple?
And the guy who, along with Bob Bering and Nicky Guido, tried to kill Anthony Casso in September of 1986 at the behest of, reportedly, Angelo Ruggiero. And of course, many of you know Jimmy Heidel was the nephew of Danny Marino. So he was an upcoming, associate. Not a good guy by any means if you look into him. But he fails in his plot to kill Anthony Casso. And the Mafia cops, they start digging. They start trying to find out who did it. And the names that they come up with is Jimmy Heidel, Bob Bering, and Nicky Guido. Of course, many of you know Nicky Guido doesn't end up getting killed. The wrong Nicky Guido ends up getting killed, which is one of the most despicable things they do. But Jimmy Heidel ends up getting abducted by the Mafia cops on October 18th of 86. And they bring him to a garage on Nostrand Avenue. A garage that was once inside this building right here. And we're going to put up the aerial views here so you guys can kind of see where we are right now. And they're going to bring Heidel here. And they're going to bring him out of the car. And reportedly, Ippolito's going to pick him up and hog tie him. Tape his mouth. And completely subdue him. And toss him into the trunk. Inside this building here. Inside the address. 2232 Nostrand Avenue. And this is the back block of this building. And he's going to deliver Heidel to the Toys R Us on Flatbush Avenue, a place where I did a video at. And they're going to make the exchange. And in that video, at the end, I go to a house, which I believe is the house where Jimmy Heidel was murdered. And I suggest you watch that video. I'll put the thumbnail up now, and I'll link it to the description of this video. So not only was Israel Greenwald killed and buried here, but when the cops start working for Casso, after they kill Greenwald, they bring Jimmy Heidel inside the confines of this building here. Tie him up, throw him in a trunk, and drive over to Flatbush Avenue. And that incident on Flatbush Avenue being the one and only time that Casso actually meets the Mafia cops. His crystal ball. When they exchange Jimmy Heidel. Once again, this building right here once held Peter Franzone's auto garage, which I refer to as the Mafia Cops' Garage of Death, right here off Nostrand Avenue. Now let's head back down this way. We'll get another look at this building, and like I said, I'll put up the aerial shot so you can kind of see what's going on over here. And I was hoping that they didn't reface this building, but it seems like in the past few months they completely refaced it, so all the original brick is not here. But as you were watching earlier, I put the Google image street view that I had, and I lined it up with the old image, what the old garages used to look like. But nonetheless, that was the location, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you enjoyed this upload. I hope you got something out of it.